Hey, welcome back to KP Unpacked. This is where the biggest ideas in AEC, AI, and innovation, they all collide into one podcast that's powered by KP ReadyCo. In this podcast, we break down the trends, the technology, the discussions, and the strategies that are shaping the built environment and beyond. And sometimes I sit down with KP Ready, our CEO and founder, and we unpack some of his LinkedIn posts. Sometimes I sit down with other people within the industry, within the KP Ready ecosystem, if you will, that are focusing on innovation for architecture, engineering, construction, and beyond. Today is one of those days. I get to sit down with one of our founding mastermind members. He's a member of the Innovation Leaders Mastermind Group. He's out of the Pacific Northwest, PAE to be exact. We'll unpack what that means, but it's Alan Montpellier, and he is the Principal and Chief Innovation Officer at PAE. My name is Jeff Eccles. I am the Executive Director of Catalyst and the facilitator of our mastermind program here at KP ReadyCo. Alan, thanks for joining me today.
Wonderful to be here, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, this goes through my head. I've got this pet peeve about people's names. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I do a lot of public address announcing for sports as well. So it's, how many names can you mispronounce in an hour is sort of what happens. I hate mispronouncing names, and I probably butchered your last name as I was introducing you. So why don't you introduce yourself, including the correct pronunciation of your name, but who are you and what do you do?
Well, appreciate that, Jeff. Yeah, I get a lot of interesting pronunciations for sure.
I'm sure.
But the proper pronunciation is, if you want to do the full French, is Montpellier. The T is silent. But yeah, I get a lot of interesting ones over the years.
I'm sure. Yeah, we've talked about the fact, and we were just joking about this before we went live. I'm in Indiana. I live in Indianapolis. I've been here about 30 years or so. And one of the things that struck me when I first came to the state is, hey, we've got a lot of French names on the map, and not a single one of them uses the French pronunciation. So if you are a French speaker and you want to be offended, just come to Indiana. We'll get you covered. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I appreciate the grace in the pronunciation of your name. I said in the intro that you're the Chief Innovation Officer at PAE. So first of all, what is PAE, and what does it mean to be the Chief Innovation Officer there?
Yeah. Let's start with PAE. We're a consulting engineering firm, and we focus on the built environment and specifically building systems such as mechanical systems, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, technology, and lighting design. And we have a passion and focus on sustainability, where our vision is clean air, energy, and water for all. It's a big vision. It's very aspirational, but we think it's an important vision. And we really try to live that vision every day as we work with clients and colleagues and try to deliver really amazing sustainable buildings.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I find that really intriguing, because one of the things, and you may have heard a little bit about this, and others around the industry may have heard a little bit about this, but as we think about the expansion of our mastermind program, one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is how do we create a sustainability mastermind group? What does that even mean, right? What does the word sustainability even mean? That's a whole episode in and of itself. But it's important to us that be a focus on the intersection of sustainability and innovation, which is what you're saying. It's what you're doing there at PAE. So I find that intriguing, because I guess that's with everything. This is very biased. It's a very biased statement, but we've got to look at different ways of creating sustainability, of creating resilience, et cetera. And I love the fact that that's really your focus in a nutshell there at PAE.
Yeah, it's, accepting status quo just won't get us, won't allow us to see any progress. And so
Yep.
we're always trying to question how we're doing things, um, and challenge ourselves, challenge our clients to think differently. Um, you mentioned the CIO, or Chief Innovation Officer role.
Mhm.
A little bit about that. The firm as a whole has been, um, considered, or we have a reputation for being innovative, and that's happened organically over the last 20, 25 years. Um, the challenge, though, and the concern that we uh, identified about 3, 4 years ago was, as our firm grew to, at the time, 250 plus people, multiple offices, mostly up and down the West Coast, and then now we're 400 plus people, and we have now East Coast presence in New York City, and even more offices. We were just concerned that this kind of ad hoc approach to innovation was not cutting it, and that we were at serious risk of not fully capitalizing and taking advantage of all these great ideas that were being generated within the firm. And we decided that we would do two things. One is create the Chief Innovation Officer role, but at the same time create the innovation group within PAE. And as we kicked things off that inaugural year, we wanted to really figure out what our mission was, number one, right? And what we settled on was this idea that our mission really should be to create and generate and reinforce this culture of innovation within PAE. And it was interesting because as we rolled things out to the firm and started to socialize it with people, immediately we had a lot of people saying, hey, I need to be in the innovation group because I'm an innovator and I want to innovate and I need to be in that group. And what we were trying to do is reinforce that, no, you don't need to be in the innovation group to innovate. And the analogy that we ended up using was that of theater production group, right? And the idea that the innovation group and the Chief Innovation Officer role, we look at ourselves as the producers, the stagehands, the director, if you will, for the theater production group, but we're not the actors or innovators on the stage. And I think that resonated pretty well. And people then started to understand, okay, I can innovate no matter what I'm doing and what role I have in the firm, and I don't need to be in the innovation group. And then we ended up identifying these key charges, if you will, that we would take on, or responsibilities we would take on, including identifying and removing barriers to innovation. We also wanted to make sure that we were offering challenge opportunities to our colleagues, specific challenges that we would put on the table, asking people what their thoughts were. We also wanted to pull people together into cohorts or groups that would brainstorm. We call our brainstorm sessions jamborees, to kind of bring a little bit of levity to it and bring some energy, just using that word. And we also do these things called future casting sessions, where we try to project ourselves out 5, 10, 15, 20 years to see, to try to guess at what might be happening in that time frame. And then the other really big thing that we do is we actively collect ideas, evaluate them, and then we put resources, including dollar value and or allowances for people to spend time to develop those ideas. So it's really become quite a significant part of the business. And, there's still a risk that we're missing some things, but we feel much more confident now that we're capturing a lot.
Yeah, one of the things that we hear, and I think this is probably especially in young innovation initiatives, if you will, or young innovation teams, um, respective to the age of the firm, perhaps, or something like that. But that I want to be on the innovation team, or I should be on the innovation, exactly as you described it. One of the dangers that we've heard is that, hey, when you launch this thing and you say this innovation team, chief innovation officer, et cetera, it it may create that mindset that you were fighting there at the very beginning, that hey, only these people on this team can innovate. And as you have described very, very nicely, the way that it works in your firm, that's actually not the case at all. And I love the analogy. I love the theater production group analogy. That explains it really, really well. Um, so, like sustainability, right? What in the world does sustainability mean? What does innovation mean at PAE? When you're focused on innovation, what are you focusing on? How does that manifest itself in maybe in your work, or your tools, or your culture?
Yeah, it takes many forms, and it's
Hmm.
interesting because we've also tried to reinforce that it's not just on the technical or engineering part of the business. Innovation can happen in the business side of the business. The
Right.
marketing team or the accounting team, or it's not just a engineering centric effort, because innovation can happen in all those areas and disciplines. Um, but we see innovation happening where it's the small incremental things, kind of like the Kaizen approach,
Sure.
incremental pieces. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then, you know, we've seen some kind of bigger swings come through where, for example, uh, we we asked ourselves, we challenged the office to see if they, or not the office, but the people in our firm, to try to come up with ideas that would leverage software and applications to um, you know help us with our clients. One of the really neat ideas that came out of it was a phone app where you could, as a homeowner, log into it, type in your address. It would pull all the information off the MLS system, and house size and age and things like that. And then you could type in what kind of sustainability improvements you would like to do. Maybe you want to go all electric. Maybe you want to reduce your electrical bill. Maybe you want to add solar panels or batteries, reduce your water use, whatever your goals are. And then it would generate ideas for you, and then even connect you with potential consultants or contractors to do the work. And we had this great experience of pitching that to a fellow who is in the VC world. And it was not like a full on, hardcore uh, uh, Dragon's Den, or if you're in Canada, or I can't remember what the Shark Tank in the US situation. But it was real enough that it was a great experience, and we got some really good feedback. So you kind of have these two ends of the spectrum, and then anything in between.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, first of all, I love that idea. That's fantastic. And we may have talked about this before, but when I run my graduate class, I run it as an incubator, and the final is Shark Tank. That's how we go through it. So I love that you went through that process, and I'm intrigued about the app, actually. That you actually answered a question that I was contemplating, is the innovation. You said innovation is looking at all areas of the business. It's not just the engineering. It's not just how we produce the deliverables. You didn't say it that way, but um, but it's all aspects of the business. So the question I was going to ask was, are you focused solely on efficiency or heavily on efficiency versus new things that you can do for your clients. I mean, that app is a great example of new offerings, so to speak. Very outside the box. If someone thinks about a consulting engineering firm that's focused on sustainability, and hey, we created this phone app. Like, what? What's that have to do with? But I think that's a great example of how of innovation. So when you and your team are gathering ideas and vetting ideas, I'm sure, and figuring out how to implement them, is there sort of a natural balance of what's efficiency, what's for in-house and what's for out of house, or how does in a realistic application in a firm, what does that look like?
I gotta be honest with you, Jeff. It's something that we are constantly struggling to navigate as to, with these different opportunities that we're seeing. A good example off the top of my head is, microgrids are becoming a very hot market or topic these days. More and more clients are interested in microgrids because they're either interested in reducing their carbon footprint with on-site renewables, and or they are interested in bringing more resilience to their property or their development. And what we're finding is that there's not really any good mechanisms out there to evaluate all of the thousands of permutations of PV panel, photovoltaic panel sizing, battery sizing, how much how much load you have, electrical load you have, bringing that all together to find the right answer for your client. And so that's a good example of a new service offering that we've been developing over the last 2-3 years. It also highlighted one of the barriers that we came upon in the last year, which is often innovation is happening at the project level. And the barrier ended up being that we had a group of people that wanted to develop a tool and use, it started out as a really, heavy duty spreadsheet, as things often do, but we really needed to move it into Python and make it more user friendly. And the team wanted to do that, but the project manager for that particular development said, no, I can't support that on the fees that we have, right? So the barrier became a KPI, a key performance indicator, in that, the PM was thinking about their profitability on the project and not wanting to sacrifice that for the sake of innovation. And so then that became this great opportunity for the innovation group to step in and say, hey, guess what? We have budget available. We will give you 100 hours, 150 hours. I can't remember the exact number. And you can go and develop that tool, because we see it as this great opportunity to not just leverage it on this project, but then use it on countless number of projects down the road and really help a number of clients. So it ends up being, we've definitely been seeing these opportunities to get into these different capabilities and service offerings that we were not as focused on previously.
Yeah. I'd like to dig into things like that, because that's real, right? We hear that. So you're, as I mentioned in the intro, you are one of the founding members of our Innovation Leaders Mastermind group. And as we look across, which is now actually split into 2 groups because of the interest in it. So as we look across the firms that are represented in the Innovation Leaders and Construction Tech Leaders Mastermind groups, I think I can safely say this, that all of the firms that are represented have innovation teams of some sort, right? They may be very small, they may be very new, some are quite mature, and some have slightly different focus, et cetera. And we hear that a lot, right? It's, well, the project manager is looking at their budget and they don't have the budget to develop this tool, and then that becomes a barrier to innovation. So, anybody that's out there listening to this right now that's wondering how this works in the wild, in the real world, I mean, this is real, right? That's a real barrier that you're talking about. We hear that over and over because it's, in AEC firms, we're so project driven, so deadline driven as well, but so project driven, so budget driven, budget per that project that's, ties back to the fee and the billable hours and your different factors that you're considering there. So it's not surprising at all that becomes a barrier to innovation. And I love the example. Hey, the innovation team says we'll give you 100 hours, we'll give you 150 hours, something like that. How do you set the budget for the innovation team that you can then distribute in that way?
Yeah, we're mixed in with the year-end budgeting process, which starts in late September, October, as I think most firms probably follow a similar schedule. And what we're trying to do is set aside both dollars and hours. On the hours side, of course, that impacts our utilization, and utilization is for consultancy is a big driver of profitability and how well we're performing financially. So, it's a balance. We're like any initiative within the firm, we're trying to figure out the right number of hours and dollars to assign. And often, we go in with an ask and then that comes back, well, we can't quite do that because, we would be negatively impacting our profit and, performance goals there. So, Alan, what can you do to dial that back? And so then we go back and we start to prioritize. So it's not unlike any other budgeting effort, but I think the big thing is, as a leadership